Hi, I'm Sarah, and today I'll read you the story of Maya. The title is I Drove 7 Hours in an Ice Storm with Christmas Gifts to Surprise My Family. When I walked in, I heard my brother say, If she skids off the road, at least we'll inherit everything. They laughed. I left. The next morning, 94 missed calls. Well, let's begin. My name is Maya. I'm 34 and I work as a financial analyst for a consulting firm in Chicago. It's not glamorous, but I like numbers. Numbers are fair. They add up, they don't judge, and they don't lie behind your back. After years of student loans and late night studying, I finally bought my own two-bedroom condo. Paid off in full last year. It was the proudest moment of my life. I wish I could say my family shared that pride, but honestly, they don't understand me. They live in a small town in Ohio in the same house where I grew up. My parents are the kind of people who think being successful means throwing the loudest barbecues, knowing every neighbor, and making sure everyone in church sees you sitting in the front row. My younger brother Ryan is exactly like them, loud, charming, always surrounded by people even when he has nothing figured out in his life. Me, I've always been the serious one. At family gatherings, relatives would pat me on the back and say, Maya, you should smile more. Don't work too hard. When will you bring someone home as if my happiness depended on fitting their picture of normal? Over the years, I became the provider. Not because they asked nicely, but because every time I came home, there were hints. Your dad's car needs new tires, but money's tight. Ryan lost another job. Maybe you can help him out until he gets back on his feet. And I did. I sent money. Thousands, actually, month after month. Quietly covering bills so they wouldn't lose the house so Ryan wouldn't get evicted. I kept telling myself that's what family does. You give and one day they'll appreciate it. But the appreciation never came, just expectation. Last December, something shifted. I'd been sending packages for years, gifts wrapped by courier delivered right on time. Mom loved bragging about them. Maya sent me this cream from Sephora, $200 a bottle. Dad would show off the power tools I ordered from Home Depot. Ryan would post his designer sneakers on Instagram with no mention of who bought them. I was the invisible hand funding their holidays, present but never present. So I made a decision. This year, I told myself I'll go in person. I missed the smell of pine needles, the way snow looked on our old porch, the sound of carols on Mom's outdated stereo. Maybe I thought if I actually showed up, we could reconnect. Maybe they'd see me as more than a bank account. When I called to announce my plan, Mom hesitated. Are you sure, sweetheart? You know how crowded it gets. Your brother has friends coming over. The neighbors will probably drop in. It might be too much for you. Her voice was polite, but I could hear at the edge. Like my visit was an inconvenience, but I smiled and said, I'll be there Christmas Eve morning. Silence. Then, all right, honey, we'll make room. The week before Christmas, a brutal ice storm rolled in across the Midwest. Roads shut down, flights canceled, news anchors begging people to stay home. My coworkers laughed when I told them I still planned to drive. 7 hours in that weather? You're insane, one said. But I'd already packed the car gift bag stacked in the back seat, an extra quilt folded in case I got stranded, 2 thermoses of coffee up front. I told myself it would be worth it. The look on their faces when I walked in with all the presents, the hugs, the surprise. Maybe we'd sit around the fire, just us before the chaos of the big party. For once, I wanted to feel like part of the family again. So at 4 in the morning on December 23rd, I set out. The drive was a nightmare. Ice glazed the interstate and trucks skidded sideways. My hands clenched the steering wheel until they hurt. At gas stations, clerks gave me pitying looks like I was out of my mind. I kept thinking, turn back, just turn back. But I didn't. 7 hours later, exhausted but alive, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Snow crunched under the tires. The porch light was on a plastic wreath hanging crooked on the door. I felt this childlike thrill. I made it. I'm home. I carried the first few gift bags up the steps. My key, yes, I still had it slid into the lock. The door creaked open and warmth spilled out. I set the bags down quietly, grinning to myself, ready to burst into the living room with my surprise. That's when I froze. I heard voices, clear as day, my parents and Ryan talking, laughing. At first it was harmless, Mom mentioning I might show up tomorrow. Dad chuckling about how I'd probably overpack gifts again. I smiled. It sounded normal. But then Ryan's voice cut through. Honestly, if Maya's dumb enough to drive in this storm, maybe she won't make it. Imagine that. The condo, the savings split between us. Finally, some good luck. Laughter followed. Not awkward laughter. Genuine. My chest tightened. My breath caught. I waited for Mom to scold him, for Dad to say, That's not funny. Don't joke like that. Instead, Mom snorted. Well, at least then we wouldn't have to pretend her little checks are such a big help. She thinks 1,000 here, 1,000 there makes her a hero. Dad added, She acts like she's better than us with her fancy job. If she shows up tomorrow, she'll ruin the party with that sour face. Honestly, it'd be easier if she stayed gone. They laughed again. I stood there in the hallway, shaking the gift bag sliding from my hand. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I didn't cry. I picked up the fallen ribbon, set it on top of the gift bag, and backed out the way I came. The door eased shut with a soft click. The porch looked the same as always, plastic wreath-chipped paint, a welcome mat that never meant it. The inflatable snowman in the yard leaned like it had given up. I knew the feeling. I walked to my car, the cold bit through my coat, but my chest felt hotter than the air could touch. I slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and sat there with my hand still on the door, like I was holding it closed on a room full of ghosts. Then I pulled away. The tires hissed over packed snow. My parents' house shrank in the rearview warm windows, staring at me like unblinking eyes. I merged onto the main road slow and careful. The storm hadn't let up. The sky was a smear. My wipers worked like they were late for something. I should have been shaking. Instead, I felt calm. Not the soft kind, the crash site kind. Half a mile down the first call buzzed Mom. Then Dad. Then Ryan. One after another. I hit silence and let the phone face down on the passenger seat. If I listened, I'd hear them pretend. If I talked, I'd give them something to use later. I drove. I stopped at a rest area where a single vending machine blinked like it was lost. I took sips of lukewarm coffee from my thermos and stared at the snow frosting the windshield coils. My breath clouded the glass. I wrote my name in it with a fingertip and watched it disappear. A thought slid in simple and hard. They said the quiet part out loud. I could argue with 10,000 little moments tone looks jokes. I couldn't argue with what I'd heard. I didn't need a second opinion. I needed a decision. Back on the road, I turned the radio off and talked to myself like I was a client. Problem: chronic boundary violations with financial dependency. Risk high. Plan: close all doors they walk through. I kept my speed steady. White lines came and went like shallow breaths. Another call. Another. Then texts. I didn't read them. I wanted something childish, something dramatic, like throwing the phone out the window. Instead, I flipped it to airplane mode. Quiet fell like fresh snow. When I reached the state line, I pulled into a diner lit with tired yellow bulbs. The sign said, all-day breakfast, even though it was nearly evening. My boots squeaked on the floor. A waitress with silver hair and a tired smile poured coffee without asking. "You're out in this," she said. "Bad reasons," I answered. "You want pie?" "No," I said, then yes. She set down apple pie and a fork. The pie was warm, soft, in the middle, crisp on top. I took one bite and nearly choked because my throat chose that moment to close. Tears finally came, not loud, just the kind that slide and keep sliding. The waitress didn't ask. She topped off my cup and left a stack of napkins. The good kind, the thick ones. When I could breathe again, I pulled out my laptop. I tethered my phone just long enough to get a connection, then shut it down again. I logged into every place I had ever created an open door. Banking first, savings, checking, brokerage. I changed passwords. I added two-factor where I'd been meaning to. I checked recent activity. Transfers popped up neat and familiar: Mom's house support. Ryan's bridge money. I had labeled them like they were noble things. House support. Bridge money. I stared at the names and felt foolish. I renamed them as I canceled them: mortgage I never lived in. Grown man's rent. I paused at my recurring payments list. I had set them up on autopilot because I trusted myself to forget. I hit cancel on each one. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" like it was trying to be my conscience. I clicked yes. Then I took screenshots and saved them in a new folder: winter cleanup. Next, shared logins. Over the years, I'd bought streaming services for the house. It wouldn't bankrupt me, but it was a thing. I reset every account. I kicked out all devices. It was petty, and it wasn't. It was mine. Finally, credit. I visited the 3 big bureaus. I pulled my reports because something in me whispered, remember this detail. Pages rolled by: my cards, my mortgage, my car. Then a line that didn't belong: a department store card in a town I'd never visited. Opened last spring? Limit low, but still. A few purchases: children's clothes, electronics, beauty products. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the amount, it was the access. Another line. A furniture store? The address on file: my parents' street. Not their house number, a basement apartment down the block. Ryan's friend, probably. Signature: MP. Not my signature, not even my initials, but close enough for someone who knew a cashier. I felt cold again. I downloaded the reports. I highlighted. I put them in the same folder. Winter cleanup grew like a snowdrift. I left the diner after tipping more than the pie cost and got back on the road. Lights blurred. I counted mile markers like prayers. When I finally pulled into my building's garage, my hands were sore from holding on. Upstairs, I dropped my bags, plugged in my laptop, and did one last thing. I wrote a short email to myself with the subject line, "This is why." I typed everything I remembered. Who said what? The tone. The laughter. The pauses, the exact words that flipped the switch. Memory is slippery when people start telling you your eyes lied. I wanted proof against future fog. I slept for 4 hours, woke up before dawn, and kept going. I brewed coffee and opened spreadsheets. Yes, I made a spreadsheet of my own life. I listed every dollar I had sent in the past 4 years. Date amount, recipient, memo line. I dug through old emails for thanks Maya notes that never said thanks. I added those to a tab called context. I wasn't making a case to a judge. I was making a case to myself. At 8, I allowed my phone to re-enter the world. It lit up like a fire. 94 missed calls. The text scrolled until the screen ran out of patience. Where are you? Are you okay? We saw the bags on the floor. Why did you run? Then the shift. Don't be dramatic. Answer your mother. Ryan feels terrible. It was a joke. Then the knife with a pleading edge, Maya. The house payment is due in 5 days. You can't do this now. I stared. I felt my face smooth into something unreadable. I typed a single message to the family group thread. I heard everything. I'm done funding people who hope I disappear. Don't contact me. Then I blocked the thread and put the phone down like it belonged to someone whose life I no longer worked in. I opened my sliding door and stepped onto the balcony. The city was a watercolor of salt and slush. A bus moaned past. Somewhere below, a dog barked at nothing. I breathed in air that tasted like metal and snow. It felt clean. That afternoon, I met Noor. Noor is my neighbor across the hall, software designer, 28, loud earrings, gentlest eyes. We nod in the elevator sometimes. That day, she saw my face and tilted her head. You okay? She asked. Family holiday, I said. Oof. She leaned on my doorframe. Do you want soup? I make too much when I'm nervous about the world. I should have said no. I said yes. She handed me a jar so hot it warmed my palms through the glass. I have cinnamon rolls too, she added. Like that was a normal sentence to say to a near stranger. In my kitchen, I told her the polite version. Not the storm, not the words, not the laughter. Just the outline. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't say, you only get one mother. She said, that sounds like a lot and you're not crazy, and do you want me to sit here while you go through whatever you need to go through? That last part mattered. She didn't want the story. She offered presents. I nodded. We ate soup that tasted like ginger and garlic and warmth, and she scrolled quietly on her phone while I finished the spreadsheet. By evening, a second neighbor texted Evan from down the hall, mid-30s, works at a credit union. We'd traded plan advice once, random he wrote. But if you ever want a second set of eyes on credit stuff, I do that all day. Holiday fraud spikes right now. I stared at that message. Remember this detail. Actually, I replied yes. We met in the lounge with my laptop. He kept it professional even though we lived on the same floor. You have a couple of inquiries that look odd, he said. He showed me dates, names of payday lender I'd never touched. Could be nothing. Could be someone tried to run applications and got denied. He printed a list from a secure terminal and slid it across the table. Freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus now. It's free. It stops everything cold. I already did, I said, this morning. He smiled. Good. Also watch your mail for letters about new accounts you didn't open. If they come, keep them. Do you think I stopped? The question tasted like rust. Do you think it could be someone in my family? He didn't flinch. It's almost always someone with access. Names, addresses, birthdays. You don't have to decide that tonight. Just lock the doors. We can sort the rest. I walked back to my place with the list folded under my arm and the first real breath I'd taken in 24 hours. I deleted family from my favorites. I added winter cleanup to my desktop. I made tea. I turned on a lamp I love because the shade glows like honey. I waited for the panic to return, but it didn't. Shock had burned off. In its place, something clear and steady. At midnight, a new email pinged through the blocks. Subject application received from River Ridge Auto Finance. Thank you for your application, Maya Patel, it began. My full name correct, my old phone number listed a dealership 2 towns over from my parents. A truck, down payment to be finalized upon cosigner confirmation. Cosigner. I read it 3 times. The document attached showed a signature that looked like someone traced my name through frosted glass. My hands didn't tremble, my jaw did. I forwarded the email to myself, saved the attachment beside the screenshots, and whispered into my empty kitchen, okay. Not grief, not rage. A simple okay, the kind that means a line has snapped taut. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city. The snow had stopped. The streets gleamed. Somewhere plows pushed piles into neat surrender. I thought of the house with the leaning snowman and the warm yellow windows and the way laughter sounds like love until you hear what it's covering. Tomorrow I'd make calls. I'd learn the shape of this mess. I'd draw new lines and nail them down with iron. For now, I turned off the lamp and let the room go quiet. The dark didn't feel like an absence. It felt like a boundary. When the lawyer slid the folder across the polished oak desk, I felt the weight of years collapse into a single moment. Inside were copies of bank statements, notarized documents, and text threads that left no space for denial. My brother, the so-called golden child, had been quietly funneling money out of our parents' retirement account into a failing side business. The very account I had helped build by giving up countless vacations, overtime hours, and promotions, also mom and dad would never feel insecure in their old age. And yet here it was, line after line of withdrawals labeled with vague descriptions, all signed under my brother's authorization. The lawyer leaned back, his voice steady. This isn't just negligence. This could fall under financial fraud. The room tilted for a moment, not because I was surprised my suspicions had been growing for months, but because the magnitude finally had evidence. For years I had been told I was paranoid, dramatic, too sensitive. But now paper did not lie. I walked out of that office into the crisp evening air, and for the first time in my life, the silence around me felt like an ally. No voices telling me to let it go. No guilt clawing at my ribs. Just the steady drumbeat of my own resolve. I knew what had to come next. I didn't confront him immediately. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I played the long game. I contacted the bank, froze any further withdrawals under legal suspicion, and had them note in the system that no changes could be made without my written approval. The look on his face when he tried to access funds a week later, only to find the account locked, must have been priceless. He stormed into my apartment uninvited, his eyes wild, his voice shaking not with shame but with fury. "What did you do?" he barked, as if my protection of our parents' livelihood was the real crime. I didn't flinch. I simply held up one of the documents and said, "This isn't about what I did. It's about what you've been doing." He snatched the paper, scanning it, and then tossed it back onto my table with a sneer. "You don't understand. I was going to pay it back. This is temporary." The same tired excuse I'd heard since childhood dressed up now in adult desperation. What struck me wasn't just the audacity, but the entitlement buried in his tone. He truly believed he had the right to gamble with the family's future because the world owed him another chance. I stayed calm, my words deliberate. Temporary theft is still theft, and this time I'm not cleaning up after you. His mouth opened, then closed like he couldn't quite comprehend a version of me that didn't bend. That silence, that fracture in his control was the first victory I let myself savor. But villains don't collapse quietly. Within days, he had rallied my parents, spinning the narrative that I was overreacting and trying to control everything. Mom called me late one night, her voice trembling between anger and pleading. "He's your brother. Family forgives. He just needs support." I clenched my jaw so hard I tasted blood, the same script word for word that had been used every time he failed. I replied softly but firmly. "Support doesn't mean enabling fraud. I won't let you be left with nothing because of his mistakes." "Not this time." Her sharp inhale told me she wasn't expecting resistance, and for the first time I didn't back down. I gathered allies quietly. My best friend Callie, steady as ever, helped me organize documents chronologically so the case was airtight. Evan, my colleague, offered to connect me with a financial crimes investigator he trusted. Even the bank manager, usually neutral, admitted in writing that the withdrawal patterns were irregular and suspicious. Piece by piece, I built a wall of evidence so high that no amount of gaslighting could climb it. The night of the confrontation came sooner than I thought. My brother showed up again this time, dragging his wife along as backup. She tried to play the role of mediator, but her sharp glances revealed her true aim to corner me into backing off. My apartment, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a stage where every truth I'd bottled had to be uncorked. I laid out the statements, one after another, like daggers on the table. His reaction followed the exact cycle the lawyer had predicted. Denial, anger, bargaining, blame. "This is fake. You forged this, then you don't get it." I had no choice. "Then if you love this family, you'd cover for me." And finally, "This is all your fault. You set me up." Each phase louder, more desperate. But I didn't raise my voice once. Instead, I ended it with a single sentence. "You've mistaken my silence for weakness. Those days are over." The shift was palpable. He realized he couldn't win this round, not with evidence staring him down. His wife hissed threats about destroying the family name, but I was already beyond fear. I informed them calmly that the documents were filed with both the lawyer and the authorities. Whatever they chose to do next, the train of consequences had already left the station. After they left, slamming the door so hard a frame rattled off my wall, I sank into my chair. For the first time in years, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was something deeper, the raw relief of finally stepping out of a cage I hadn't realized was locked until I held the key. The fallout spread quickly. My parents wavered at first, torn between their loyalty to him and the undeniable evidence. But as the investigation deepened and letters arrived from financial authorities, even they could no longer pretend. The community began to whisper, then talk openly. His once polished image cracked, exposing the selfishness that had always lurked beneath. And me, I stopped hiding. I stopped apologizing for protecting myself, for refusing to be the scapegoat one moment longer. But this wasn't the end. No, it was the turning point. Because justice wasn't just about freezing accounts or gathering evidence. It was about reclaiming every piece of myself they had tried to bury. And I wasn't done yet. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, a stern-looking man in a gray suit showed up at my workplace asking for me. He introduced himself as a financial crimes investigator and said he wanted to clarify a few details about the withdrawals. My stomach tightened, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. Finally, someone outside the family was looking at the truth without filters, without excuses. I showed him the statements. I'd collected the emails where my brother had practically admitted borrowing funds, even the screenshots of his text messages bragging about a new business venture no one else had seen. The investigator didn't smile or comment much. He just took careful notes, then nodded once before leaving. That small nod felt like the first real validation I'd had in years. But if I thought exposure would bring my family closer to reality, I was wrong. My phone lit up night after night with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. My Aunt Marjorie accused me of tearing the family apart. My cousin sent a voice message saying I was being heartless because blood is blood. They weren't calling to ask about the truth, they were calling to convince me to stay silent. It was surreal, like everyone had rehearsed the same lines. Meanwhile, the only silence came from my brother. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't show up at my door again. That silence was louder than all the phone calls combined. It meant he was scared. The first hearing was set in February. I walked into that courthouse with Callie at my side, her steady presence reminding me that I wasn't walking this path alone. Tabasai. My parents sat 2 rows behind my brother, their faces pale but their eyes resolute. They still hadn't forgiven me, but I could see in their expressions that reality had begun to sink in. My brother looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the smug smile, the air of untouchable confidence. His lawyer tried to argue that these were family matters, that the withdrawals had been consensual, that I was exaggerating for personal gain. But then my lawyer, sharp, precise, and unflinching, laid out the evidence in sequence, line after line, transfer after transfer, the pattern undeniable. When the judge leaned back in his chair and raised an eyebrow, I knew the tide had shifted. Still, winning in court didn't erase the emotional battlefield outside it. Mom showed up at my apartment after the hearing, her hands shaking as she clutched a bag of homemade food. She looked older than she had a year ago. "Please," she whispered, "don't push this too far. He's still your brother. We can survive this if you just let it go." I stared at her, my heart aching, but my resolve unbroken. "Do you hear yourself survive this?" "Mom, he stole your survival. He would have left you with nothing, and you still want me to let it go." Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't answer. She just set the bag of food on my counter and walked out. I didn't stop her. Some silences you have to let be. The weeks that followed were both brutal and liberating. On one hand, the gossip in our hometown spread like wildfire. Old neighbors who once praised my brother now whispered about him in grocery store aisles. On the other hand, I started to feel a strange kind of freedom. The secret I had carried alone for so long was no longer mine to hide. People knew. People talked. And the truth, ugly as it was, belonged to everyone now, not just me. But justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about clarity. One night, Callie asked me what I really wanted from all this. "Do you want him in jail? Do you want your parents to finally admit you were right? Or do you just want peace?" Her question haunted me for days. Because the truth was, I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to see him locked away forever or stripped of everything. What I wanted, what I needed, was acknowledgement. I wanted him and my family to admit the years of manipulation and betrayal. Without that, punishment felt hollow. Then something unexpected happened. My brother's wife, who had stood by him so fiercely before, showed up at my workplace one afternoon. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Her voice was quiet, almost broken. I didn't know the extent of it. "He lied to me too. I thought you should know." She handed me a small envelope. Inside were receipts, handwritten notes, and even a confession scribbled in his handwriting where he admitted taking the funds, planning to replace them, and blaming me if anyone asked. My hands trembled as I read. This was the final nail. She looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "Do what you have to do. I can't protect him anymore." Then she walked away, leaving me speechless. The second hearing was shorter. With the new evidence, his lawyer had little ground to stand on. The judge ordered restitution, froze his assets, and handed down a suspended sentence with mandatory supervision. It wasn't prison, but it was accountability, and it was public. My brother's reputation, his precious shield, was shattered. For once, people saw him not as the charming prodigal son, but as what he truly was: reckless, selfish, and destructive. 3 months taught my life a new rhythm: windows open, coffee in a quiet kitchen. The plant catching the first light. No surprise knocks, no keys turning in my lock, no phone buzzing with other people's emergencies. Work shifted too. Jonas put me on a product that mattered: simplifying prescription refills for seniors. Evan drew tiny shields on the whiteboard whenever stress spiked. Mira led a brown bag on boundaries and said, "Clarity is kindness to yourself," and looked at me. I still took notes because writing steadies me. The legal clinic checked in once. No violations. The paper held. HR's trespass notice stayed in a folder I never needed. Ruth taped a second sign by the elevator: "Quiet lives here," and handed me a spare mailbox key just in case. I didn't lose mine. Being trusted felt new. Family news came through Danny. The baby arrived on a wet Thursday: 10 fingers, 10 toes, cheeks like bread dough. A cropped photo without adults. "Healthy," she wrote. I stared and felt relief braided with sadness, and a fierce wish let him grow up in truth, not content. Tasha pivoted. The livestream backlash was loud enough to hear. She rebranded to Honest Motherhood: fewer ambushes, more laundry. No more tagging brands with my name. She sold the ring light and filmed in the yard. I didn't watch. Danny said it was quieter. This time, quiet felt like grace. Noel took a night shift at a warehouse, hated it. Kept it diapers, don't care about dreams. He texted Danny, "Tell Lena I'm working." He didn't ask for money. That was new. Dad got practical fences, a porch step, more fences, fair prices, better sleep. He emailed the clinic, "We are complying, full stop. No guilt ribbons attached." Mom stayed off my phone. 1 card to the P.O. box, a watercolor leaf, and 3 lines were adjusting. "I hope you are well." Mom. I put it in a drawer. Love doesn't need performance. Absence can be a boundary and a balm. I turned 33 over a chocolate cake in a kitchen that was mine. Callie lit a candle. Make it count. I wished for steadiness. Evan brought a helium balloon that shouted, "You did it," about what? Unclear. Mira gave me a tiny binder. Not someday. Today. I laughed and cried at once. Then the binder went to work. Pre-approval landed. I toured places that smelled like paint and optimism. Most were wrong. Then a crooked little row house 2 rooms down, 1 up, a pocket garden with stubborn herbs, sunlight pooling like it belonged. Ruth said, "Go again at dusk. Light tells the truth." It did. I offered under asking. They countered. I accepted. The contract used hereby twice. I signed without shaking. The someday folder became today. Closing day smelled like rain. I signed a stack that could stun a horse. The escrow officer slid over a small plain key, heavy with 1 word: mine. The house answered with echo. It didn't scare me. Echoes mean room to fill. I told no one online. I texted the 8 who earned the quiet message months ago: "Pizza on the floor Saturday." They came with folding chairs and soft laughter. Evan stuck a tiny shield sticker on my fuse box. Callie snapped a photo, me key in hand hair. A mess happiness that didn't need witnesses. 2 weeks later, bag of lemons in hand, I saw Noel by a tree on my block with a stroller. He looked startled, like he'd wandered into my peace. "I can keep walking," I said. "No, it's okay." We stood there. The baby slept, fist tucked under cheek. Noel's voice was rusty. He'd been promoted forklift certified, better pay. He apologized for a list I knew by heart: the money, the binder, the listing, the texts, the steam shot cinnamon rolls. I didn't rush to rescue it. "Thank you," I said. "Keep the job. Grow up for him." He promised no cameras without consent. "Do you want to hold him?" The old script crawled up my spine. "Be the aunt. Fix it." I took a breath and chose new lines. "Not today. I'll send a book." He nodded like a man who'd finally met a boundary. He glanced at my lemons. "Pasta, some things don't change." "Pasta," I said, and stepped out to my door. "Goodbye, Noel." Inside, the house hummed. I opened a window. A 20-year-old love song drifted in and had aged well. A month later, I hosted a small housewarming. No posts, no photos, for ghosts. Painters tape name tags. Father Ken brought basil and a short blessing about doors, not debt. We toasted with sparkling water. To paper that holds, I said. To work that matters. To people who knock. To rooms we fill on purpose. Mira added, to saying no without a footnote. We added it and laughed. I framed the old note from my previous place, good luck, and hung it by the door. Spell broken. Wish returned to sender. People ask if I forgave my parents. Forgiveness for me is quiet and unclenching, not a reunion. I don't wield the story like a weapon or pass it around for likes. I keep it in a drawer and take the lesson, not the weight. Do I miss them? I miss the version of us that never existed. I don't miss being the net. My life isn't a movie. It's a Tuesday where I forget to water the basil, a Thursday where my team ships something good, a Sunday coffee on the stoop, while a neighbor's kid wobbles by on a scooter. Ordinary is my victory lap. If you were me, steady job, family chaos, your name and someone else's plans. Where would you draw the line? When does help become harm? What boundary do you wish you'd set sooner? Tell me in the comments. Not for drama, for practice. For the next time you carry your own key and say, "This door is mine."